Welcome to the Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey podcast. I am your host, Jamie, and I am so excited that you're here. Each week, I invite a girlfriend to join me on the show, and we chat about the big things in life, the little things in life, and everything in between. If you're a longtime listener, or if you're new to the Happy Hour, I want to mention the Christmas special I did a few weeks ago with my friend Jen Hatmaker. Make sure you listen to that episode in these last few days before Christmas, because beyond having some really great gift ideas, the episode itself talks a lot about great companies doing really amazing things. I super encourage you to check out that episode number 63 if you haven't. Today's show of the Happy Hour is sponsored by Mad Marketplace. The vision of Mad Marketplace is so simple: to create a global consumer movement that matters. They're not just words. We want the difference we make to be global. We want consumers to know of ways to be good stewards when they shop. If we all shop with the hope to make a difference, our spending creates a movement, and that matters. Who says that shopping and making a difference don't go together? There are clearly more problems around us than there are solutions. Most of them are quite daunting: poverty, hunger, human trafficking, orphan care, and so many more. As consumers, we can choose to buy differently and be a part of the solution. The mission of Mad Marketplace is to tell stories, sell products, and help people. Mad Marketplace's products give back in different ways. Some examples include buy one, give one, proceeds that participate in microlending, sustainable living wages, empowering women, meal for meal, drop for drop, and restoring hearing. No matter what you buy, every purchase has a purpose. Mad Marketplace offers the consumer a different way to shop, a different reason to buy, and more than one way to help. Customers may choose products that vary from peanut butter, baby blankets, coffee, lamps, statement jewelry, rain boots, that just names a few. Check out themadmarketplace.com and be ready to make a difference this Christmas. And just for Happy Hour listeners, they have a special for you, 25% off with the code MADHappyHour25. That's themadmarketplace.com. Guys, you're listening to episode number 67, and today's guest is my friend Sarah Bessey. Sarah and I talk about so many wonderful things, stuff like how to find your identity when you love your kids and family but have a desire to exist beyond those things. We also talk about journeying through miscarriage and the story behind Sarah's pregnancy with her daughter Maggie. Guys, make sure you listen to that story and its effect that it had on Sarah. Sometimes when I listen to podcasts, I want to send the podcaster a tweet right then to answer their question or tell something I love. And so if you feel like you want to do that to us, we welcome it. If you want to chat with Sarah and I about anything from the show, feel free to send us a tweet. I am Jamie_Ivey, and Sarah is at Sarah Bessey. That's SarahBessey, at Sarah Bessey. You can find us on Twitter. Guys, here is my conversation with my friend Sarah Bessey. Okay, Sarah, thanks for coming on my show. This is great. I have so much. I hope that you're ready to verbal process with me about something.
Okay, I hope I am too, because I'm a terrible verbal processor. You know this about me.
I know. I'm a verbal processor, and I go around and around and around and around and around, and then I like change my mind 800 times. I'm like, okay, this is where I feel. Okay, so I'm going to have you help me with this, but I think it's going to be in your wheelhouse, so you're good. Okay, I've been listening to a new podcast.
Okay.
I'm going to pull it up so I make sure I know exactly what to tell you. First of all, before we get going, I introduced you. I will in the thing. I introduced you, but just tell everyone that's listening, like, who's Sarah Bessey? If you, not a formal introduction that you write down and you send in your bio. Who is Sarah Bessey besides the bio that everyone reads?
So basically no third person talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think probably, I'm Canadian. That's one of the things not a lot of people, miss right off the bat as soon as I open my mouth. So I'm from Western Canada, which is just in Vancouver. I'm in a city just outside of Vancouver, which is, I could play it cool and say that it's not as beautiful as it looks in the pictures, but it's actually even better.
Is. I know my geography in life is bad. I know zero about Canada. Like if you wouldn't have described where Vancouver was, for all I knew, it could have been like above New York. Like I have no idea where anything is in Canada, which is sad because I'm like, it's a wonderful country right next to us, and I've never been.
Oh, you should absolutely come.
I hear it's wonderful and beautiful.
It is, and I really love where we live. We're right between the mountains and the ocean, and so it's just lovely, but it's not quite as cold as the rest of Canada. I grew up more in the prairies, and so I am very over shoveling snow and scraping windshields. So this feels pretty good.
Good.
Other than that, my husband and I have been married for nearly 15 years. We met in university. He's from Nebraska. and we
Which
met
I
in
love.
university. Yeah, and so then we lived actually in Texas for a few years together, and then I brought him back home, and we've been back home for probably about 10 years now.
Was that a hard pull? Like, he's a Nebraska guy. You were in Texas, and then you're like, hey, let's go back to Canada, where I'm from. How was that?
It was actually pretty good. I mean, right from the start, I think Brian always really loved Canada, loved, kind of our people and our ethos and, just the energy of the West and all those things. And so he felt really at home here. But I think the thinking you want to live in a place and living in a place can be very different.
Right. Yep.
It's like how you kind of romanticize it
Uh-huh.
almost. And I think that might have been where he was. And then that first year or two was huge culture shock for him.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think that there's not a lot of differences between, Canada and America. But it was definitely there for him. And so it took a little while for him to kind of get his feet underneath. But I mean, I was really happy he wanted to move home to Canada, and we were wanting to start a family, and my family was all here, and there were just a lot of different factors. But I was really happy to come home. I was, I'm a Canadian girl, really right to the core. I can't imagine living anywhere else and feeling at home anywhere else, and so I've tried my best, but I'm bad at it. So,
But you guys get down to Nebraska. I mean, y'all are good at coming down and visiting. So that's
absolutely. And Brian's family is really good about coming up and seeing us as well, and so that helps. We don't get down quite as much anymore because we have 4 kids.
everything
And
changes.
plane ticket is just like
It's
extortion.
it's crazy expensive.
It's the worst.
I always tell my kids, I'm like, we will never fly together as a family anywhere. Like, how can we afford 6 plane tickets? It is so crazy expensive.
It is prohibitive. And so we've
it's
actually even started over the last couple of years picking a point kind of in between Nebraska and Vancouver and just meeting somewhere in Colorado or in Washington State, where we can drive there, or it's a quick one flight for us as opposed to, a lot of connectors or anything like that. And then we just have a week together on holiday, as opposed to, going all the way to Omaha, which can be a bit harder to get to.
Well, I can tell you this. I went to Montana last summer, 2 summers ago, something like that. And it is like one of the most beautiful places in the world I've ever been. And so I can even just imagine what your world looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those sleeper hits. Like nobody really comes because they want to go to the big places, and then they come out, and all the rest of us are like, "Shh, don't tell
anybody." Yeah, that's like our favorite place in Mexico. Whenever we come home, we have another couple friend that we go with. They're like, "Don't tell anybody where we went because people will start to show up." It's wonderful. Sarah, one of my favorite things about you, as I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years, is how much you love your family. Like it just like overflows from you. Like when you talk about being a mom, there's something about it that I'm a little bit envious of. And it just is like, it's so beautiful. Like you love being a mom, and it shows. And so you have 4 kids. You told me 9, 7, 4, and then your new one, 7 months old, which I want to talk about that whole thing of the new one. But first, this is what I want to chat with you about a lot, is because I know that you do both very well. You do work very well, and you do motherhood very well. And somewhere along the line, people started to think that you had to pick one or the other. I think that we struggle with this as moms, and your work is a writer, but anybody's work could be whatever it is. How do you do both well? Because I think that you do, and so you might be thinking, I don't, Jamie.
I'm right. I don't know whether to laugh or cry over that.
But my thing is, I think that it's probably been a struggle for you, I would imagine. It's been a struggle for me, and I know that there are people listening that are like, I want to be a great mom and a great fill in the blank, like whatever it might be, whatever you do in life. How do you do both of them well?
Well, first of all, thank you. I don't know that I really do both of them well all the time. And I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed motherhood. I was never someone who, just longed to have babies and, anything like that. I mean, I think I quit babysitting when I was 14 because I had figured there had to be a better way to make money than that.
Right.
It was never really my thing. And so how my life was kind of turned inside out, and how much joy I got out of sort of those daily rhythms and raising my children, and the things that I enjoy about it. But there's a lot of things about motherhood I don't really enjoy, or that I'm not really good at. And it's the same thing, from a working perspective. When I initially had children, I was still working full time outside the home. My background is more in marketing and in project management and that kind of work, and I did that working full time, for a lot of years. I didn't actually become, more of a stay-at-home mom / writer until almost probably about 2 years ago. So, most of my motherhood time has been like my real job, writing somewhere in the middle of that, and then of course also, your family, and you want to have a marriage somewhere in the midst of all that, and be a person, all the different things that are going on. So in terms of how it all, I guess, fits together, is I've pretty much decided that the idea of balance is crap.
Okay, tell me more.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's just sort of, there's times where it looks like a bit of a mess, but I feel like, I don't know, it's perhaps hard to maybe articulate, because there's seasons where I really, put my thumb and really focus heavily on, something that's going on with my children, or something that's happening in our home, or whatever else, when they really need, maybe a lot more presence, or a lot more time, and intentionality. But on the same token, I think that it's really good for my children to see me loving what I do. And I think it's really good for them to see me pursuing my passions, and to see what that looks like. I think it's good for them to see me as a whole person, as opposed to just one role in their life. The other thing I have really learned to love is kind of almost sharing those things together, having them be part of it, instead of kind of creating these false demarcations in my life of, this is my sacred work, and this is my, my secular work, or this is my mom life, and this is my work life. The more those things are seamless and kind of connected to one another, I feel more holistic, I suppose. I feel more, engaged with each one of them. But I wouldn't want anybody to sort of look at it from the outside and think that it's like, neat and tidy and orderly and well balanced, because it's really not. And sometimes it looks like a bit of a mess, and we're still kind of figuring it out. But I want there to be joy in the midst of the figuring it out.
That's good. I think it's good to hear you say that. People are listening, because they might be thinking, Sarah has 4 kids. She has written 2 books. She speaks. She does all this other kind of stuff. And so it must all be easy, and it must all fit well, because she's doing it. But it is so good for us to hear from people to be like, it's really messy sometimes. And it doesn't all fit in a box.
No. And there's lots of things I say no to. And I think that that's the other side as well, is that there's seasons in our life. There's the way things kind of, work together and don't. I think that there might be times in my life where I really can ramp up the work side of my life, but other times, like right now, I kind of, dial it down a little bit, because I've got a nursing baby and, all those different types of things. So I don't travel as much. I don't, I'm not gone for more than, maybe 24 or 48 hours. And it requires, CSIS level accountability to make sure everything lined up for mom to be leaving the house, right? So it's a huge price for everybody to pay.
Exactly. Someone asked me just this week, they're like, hey, how can we pray for you and Aaron this week? And I was like, well, I'm leaving on Thursday to go out of town. And so whenever I travel, it sometimes brings stress, because then, Aaron has different responsibilities that he doesn't normally have when I'm here. So I'm like, it takes a lot for a mom to leave. I feel like I've been listening to this new podcast called Magic Lessons with Elizabeth Gilbert. Have you heard this?
Yes, I love that. I was actually going to talk to you about that another time. So I'm glad that.
Okay, so what happened in my life? This is my processing. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed a friend named Carrie Sowers. Do you know Carrie Sowers? Okay, so she said something very at the end of our show. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but when she said it, I literally have not stopped thinking about it. And she said, I think that everyone was created to create. Like, we're all creative people. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not. Like, I don't write music. I've never written a book. I don't paint anything. All of these things that I thought equal creative, I'm like, I've never written a screenplay. You know what I mean? Like, if you put like the list of creative stuff, but I cannot stop thinking about that. And I'm starting to think, Sarah, that I might be a creative person, because like for me, like I created a show, like I created a podcast. So I'm like, does that
Yes.
make me a creative? And so
Yes.
my whole like world has been opened up to this new side of me. I'm like having this self-awareness at 37 years old that I think I'm a creative.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to live as a creative because I never, when people talk about creatives, I don't listen because I'm not a creative. And so I started listening to this podcast, Magic Lessons with Elizabeth Gilbert, and I started at the end, which I don't reckon, I should have started at the beginning, but the last one was with Brene Brown. And I have never read any of her books. I know, I need to. But it was so encouraging to me. And I'm like, and so then I start thinking about, okay, people being a creative and a mom. And today on the show, Cheryl Strayed, I was listening to her episode, and she said something like what you just said. She said, being a mom and a writer, or whatever your creative thing is, she goes, sometimes you have to give more to one than the other. And she's talking about mothering versus her work. And she said, I know I'll get some backlash for that. But she said, when I was finishing writing Wild, I left for 3 weeks. And she said, I knew some people would think, how do you leave a 6 and a 7-year-old? You're a mom for 3 weeks. And she's like, but that's what I had to do in that moment, you know? And she said what you said too. She's like, I don't want my kids to see me as I put myself into my work. So I have all these creative thoughts going on in my head that I just am like, can I call myself a creative? That's like this new thing for me. It's weird.
Yeah. No, I think that you can, and I think it's totally legit. I've always thought of you as someone who was creative. You've always been creating things like this, and you love to communicate and create connections between people. So I think that all those things add up, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, to me, I think there's something really fun for me for my children to see work as a blessing. And for them to see it as something that is honorable and good and worth making space for, and that my work is just as valuable and good, whether or not I'm getting paid for it, simply because I love to do it.
Yeah.
Because there are seasons in my life where I made let me be years.
Yeah.
I couldn't sell an article if I, paid someone for it. And yet I was still scribbling on my lunch breaks and, blogging after the babies went to bed at night, just because I loved to do it.
And you had it in you, like it was in you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those doors, they opened up at some point, but the truth is I'll be writing long after the lights go out and nobody's reading and paying attention anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that there is something inherent to us that we love to create. I feel like I'm a better mom when I'm being creative. I can sometimes almost get this idea in my head, like, I'm just going to sacrifice my work in order to be a better mom. And what ends up happening is I end up becoming like short-tempered or irritable, or I get this big martyr complex kind of happening of like, don't you see all the sacrifices?
Yeah, right.
For you people. And instead, it's like when I am making time and space to feed my creative life, to write, to pursue the things that kind of fill the well of my creativity, I am a much better mother.
Yeah.
I am a better mother when I'm working.
Yeah.
And I think my children appreciate that. And I know my husband thinks I'm much better to live with.
When you have that outlet.
For those things, right? When you have an outlet and you feel more like a person instead of just one aspect of your role. I think there's something really special there.
I love that. And I think I wasn't raised thinking about these things. And so for me, it was almost like this martyr syndrome of like, well, I can't really do this because I have to be a really good mom, or I can't really do this because I have to be a really good wife. And just somewhere along the way, I started figuring out that, like you're saying, that these things can go well together. Like they can
make you almost better at them because you're more fully yourself and you're more fully engaged. You feel like you have come alive. You're bringing your whole self to the table, right? And that makes a huge change in all your relationships.
It's the weirdest thing for me. Like being 37 and figuring out new things about yourself is kind of fun. And I'm just like, wow, this is great. I'm 37 and I just figured things out about myself,
I think that we'll always be doing it. We'll be doing it when we have, nobody left in the house. And
nobody's here.
We'll have to redefine ourselves all over again, and not just as people who, want to do nothing but eat baking for supper. When I don't have to cook for anybody anymore.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Sarah, all 4 of your kids are just beautiful. But can I tell you that you're Evelyn? Like when I see pictures of her, I just see joy. Is she a joyful person?
She is. You know what? She is a very joyful child. But she is also a very intense child. So you kind of have like, that yin and yang thing,
Yes.
right? Of just whatever. The one thing about Evelyn that we all love and that really comes across in every area of her life is that whatever she does, it's with her very much whole heart.
That is a good
You know,
quality.
it is, you know what? So if she's happy, her whole self is happy. And she is a joyful girl and goes through, I would say, 95% of her life with that kind of energy and enthusiasm. So her personality definitely matches her hair.
She is so just beautiful. Okay, I want to talk to you about your fourth baby. That before you got pregnant with your fourth child, you had made a decision that you were done with kids.
Yes.
And was that like, some people are just like, yeah,
Not
we're
only did
done. But
Not only
wasn't
did I make like, I did not want to have any more kids. I wrote like this
I was
seminal
gonna
post
say.
that went viral that talked about like the ache of after you don't have any more children and what this looks like to finally resolve that you're done, that this baby season of your life is over. And then I got pregnant.
It's just the best because it's just like God that you were like, I am so done. And you're like, we're convincing yourself and everyone else that you were okay with it. But you
Yes.
were okay with it, right?
I
Or were
was.
you
You know
not?
what? No, I was okay with it. You know what? We had only ever wanted to have, two kids according to, the plan,
Right.
which means nothing.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of struggles with miscarriages over the years. And so the ability to sort of plan and have sort of this, cause and effect kind of thing happening wasn't really ours. And so there was a lot of, grief and complications and things that were all involved in kind of our process of having children. So Evelyn was our one more. She was my just one more, please. I love this way more than I thought I would, and I'm just not ready to be done with pregnancy and babies and nursing and the whole thing. So we had her, and then I probably grappled for about 2 years of feeling like, am I really done? Am I not really done? Some little part in my heart really wanted to have another baby, but everything in my life said that we would be satisfied and we were happy and fine, and
Right.
logistically and career and all the different things. And as the years sort of ticked along, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm really enjoying having big kids, and all of a sudden I didn't feel conflicted as much anymore about it. So I wrote that big post and kind of talked about how just it's worthwhile to notice the seasons of your life sort of passing, and that is something that just happens. Your children grow up, and all of a sudden you don't have babies anymore, and all of a sudden you're into big kid territory, which is wonderful, and I love big kids. So we went through all that, and then of course we found ourselves having a new baby, just like completely unexpected. It was absolute, shock. I still feel like laughing hysterically about it when I think about it, because I'm like, we had our first three kids in 4 years, so it was chaos. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, we have one brand new little baby, and it has just been, harder on me physically. I think having a baby when you're a little bit older is just different at 36 than it is at 26.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But on the flip side, bringing home a baby to a house full of big kids has been awesome.
I've heard people say
so
that the best thing about having a baby is if you have big kids in the house. Like, it's just like,
it's phenomenal.
it's the best.
It is. Like, nobody's got their nose out of joint, really. Everybody's kind of secure in their place in the family, and it's just like they're all, starry-eyed over this brand new little baby, and they just, worship her and it's like she's just holding court in the house at all times.
She is the peacemaker.
Yes, she brings everybody. So it's been really fun to see them move into that space and to have that. I know when I got pregnant with her, it was really disorienting. And it was complicated. I was happy and I was really glad, but I was also, like I said, it was a complete reorientation of the life that I thought I was living, of the way the direction my career was going, of the direction my home was going, and my children and my life and my marriage and all the things.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit disorienting, but one night I remember my husband saying to me, I really do wonder if this is your little desire of the heart baby, that you really did still want to have one last little baby, and this is just a gift, and we can just receive it as that. And the funny thing is that now I don't have that ache.
You feel complete.
Yeah, I do. I don't think I could write that post ever again. I think that was a post for like one moment in my life. But really it was probably indicative of the fact that I really needed Maggie.
Well, you just shared that you had struggled with having miscarriages. And I feel like I had 2 miscarriages as well in my life. And I feel like when when you have a friend and they have their first miscarriage, and then you say to them something they never knew, and you say, I've been there too, it's almost like they go, oh, really? I didn't know that. So I feel like there are these things in our life. It's not like you walk around with a sign that says, I've had 2 miscarriages. It's just not this common conversation.
No.
But I feel like when you have it with a woman, especially someone who has just walked through that, it's like all of a sudden they look and feel like, I'm not alone. Like, okay, this is happening.
Yeah.
So can we talk about when you, in your early pregnancy with Maggie? I think it's an amazing story. I mean,
It is.
It's
a crazy story.
It's a crazy story. And I don't mean this story to be like, oh, if you're, struggling with infertility, here's Sarah's story. This is going to happen to you. I don't say that at all. I say that I love this story because I feel like I remember listening to you, like having been through having miscarriages, and then feeling this, like I remember your pain, and then I remember the joy. And so can you just share a little bit of that story about early on in your pregnancy with number 4?
Sure. I've, written about it a little bit here and there over the year since I found out I was having Maggie, but really, right as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I was really scared, because of our history and those complications and myself being older now. I really was quite certain that I just had a bad feeling about it, if that makes sense. I mean, I just kind of was like, I don't know if we should be getting the kids all excited about this yet. I don't really know how I feel about this. I don't really know how this is going to go. So we found out we were expecting her. I went right to the midwife to find out that everything was okay, because that's typically something they like to do at this point in my, in my life, just because of my history. And there was no heartbeat. And I was probably about 8 weeks pregnant at the time, so it's still a little bit early, for sure, not quite yet time to panic. And then, we let it go for a little while, and I was, definitely worried, especially because I think none of the usual kind of, not symptoms, but things that indicate that your body's pregnant, like whether it's morning sickness or exhaustion or, sore boobs or whatever, right? Yeah. Like none of those things were happening for me. I felt the exact same as I did 2 months before as I did that day. And that is 100% how I always felt when I was having miscarriages. For my babies that I managed to deliver, I had morning sickness and I had all the things. And so that was I was one of those people who was really excited about puking.
Right. You're like, this is a good thing.
And then things were going well. So.
Right.
And so when that wasn't happening, I was like, oh, this is really not great. And so we went through a little bit longer, and up to I think it was almost 9 or 10 weeks, there was still no heartbeat. And so they sent us in for a ultrasound, more, a little bit more of a detailed one, just to kind of see what was going on. And we were, at this point, I think I had given up. I don't know that I really had a lot of faith at that point. I was really more preparing for the worst. I had really sort of let it go. And at that point, I really, kind of turned to my husband, and I turned to, a few trusted friends and, my family, and just said, you can have faith for me. You can believe for me. But this isn't going to be a big story about how I, just stood on the word and, all the things happened, because I didn't really have a lot more than a lot of grief. I didn't even have unbelief. I just had more just grief and sadness.
Did your husband have faith?
And we went in for that. Pardon me?
Did you feel like that, that Brian, did you feel, did he carry that? Did he feel faithful, or?
I think so. Okay. I think he did. He was really still hopeful. He was still, believing for the best. And he was happy to kind of shoulder that, and just let me just sort of rest in it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we went for one final check just before they were going to book procedures, just to kind of, I guess finish everything off. I just, with all my other miscarriages, I let them sort of happen naturally, as my body sort of, wanted that to happen. And this time I just was like, I can't do it again. I can't do it again. I cannot go into labor for a baby that will not live again. Yeah. And so we were just kind of doing one last check before they were booking those procedures. And we went in just to kind of get an idea for what was going on. And we're sitting there in silence, and the technician knew what was, going on. And so there was none of this false hilarity or anything like that, And all of a sudden she just sat up and she went, 173 beats a minute.
Oh my God.
And we just sat up and we went, what? And she's like, there's a heartbeat and it's going 173 beats a minute. The baby's alive. And we just burst into tears.
Oh my gosh.
Just burst into tears. And I had I still can't even tell you what that moment felt like, feeling like that was happening. And so there was a steady heartbeat. There was a baby there where there had been no heartbeat. And I still don't know what to say about that or what to think about it. I don't know if it was a miracle or if it was just we missed it and it just didn't show up or what was going on. But all I know is that there was nothing and then there was. And, we continued throughout the pregnancy, even having other moments where I wasn't really sure. Like she was very late to move. All my other children had moved at like 14 weeks and 15 weeks and 16 weeks. And I didn't feel Maggie move until I was 20 weeks pregnant. And so that 4 weeks between when I was expecting her to move and when she actually started moving was a really long 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So by the time we finally, delivered her and she was here and she was safe, I just felt like we had been through a war together. Through that whole pregnancy. It just was one thing after another. And then I wasn't well. And it just was such a different experience than my other pregnancies. And it just felt like crossing a finish line and we were just getting started.
Right. So I love so much about that story, but when you told me that you told your husband and your family, like, you got to have faith for me because I can't do this. And then you went through the 40 weeks and you struggled to feel her move. And so there was that stress again. And then finally, like, you have delivery and you have Maggie. How would you say your faith has been altered?
I think that one of the things that have really settled for me, because I came from a tradition that seemed to be more cause and effect about how we pray. If we pray in a certain way, if we believe in a certain way, then you will get these answers. And things that didn't line up with those answers meant not that God was bad or wrong, but rather that there was something that you were missing. So, I think that there's benefits to being raised that way because on the one hand, I felt like right from the start, my understanding of the nature and character of God was as profoundly good. That there was no darkness, there was no shadow, there was no turning in God towards me, that God's heart for me was wholeness and goodness and life and beauty and, all those things, healing, and so that was a beautiful picture of God to grow up with. But then on the flip side, you have this burden of, well, then I screwed up. Then I'm doing something wrong if bad things happen, right? And sometimes, and it's not, but on the other side, there's, people who believe that, different things about God, is that or this angry, mean judge who doles out, gifts appropriately to your behavior or whatever else, right? So for me, what I felt like I kind of learned about faith was that, first of all, I knew nothing. And that became almost okay with me. I really found a lot of comfort in the parable that Jesus tells about the persistent widow, about how this woman who had been done wrong by it stands outside a judge and hammers on the door and waits and begs and does not leave until he finally relents and gives her the justice that she is seeking. And God is not the judge in that story, right? God is more the father and the prodigal son, right? The one who runs down the road to meet the one who has walked away with just that exuberance and that connection. But I felt like she was kind of my only hope. Like I didn't know what would be the end result. I didn't know if I would get what I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted, but I knew it was worthwhile to keep knocking.
Yeah.
And so I just said, you know what, here's what I believe God wants for me. Here's what I believe about the nature and character of God. Here's what I believe his heart is towards me and towards all of humanity. And so I'm just going to keep praying and knocking in that direction, and because I believe it's worthwhile to do.
Sarah, I love the story of your fourth child. I really, really do. And I don't love it because I don't even think I love it because of such of the miracle that it is, if that's what it is. But I love it because of that God, you had come to terms and said, I feel like I'm okay with this. But God always had his plan. Like he always knew what was best for Sarah and for Brian and for all of your kids. Like he always knew. And so even when you felt like, you know what, I think I'm okay. God was like, but I have something coming for you.
Yeah.
I have something for you that you don't even know how much you need. That's why I love that story so much. It's just so beautiful.
I feel like, every child you have really changes you. There's a before and an after. It's always, and sometimes you don't know how much your life is being turned around until it's sort of being turned inside out a few times. And each one of my children has been that for me. They have been a reorienting. They have been brought such richness and depth, not only to my life and hopefully, but to my understanding of who God is and of our purposes and how we connect with one another and what those things mean. But the experience of having Maggie and what we walked through with her, and then what we went through, during her delivery, which I haven't really talked a lot about and probably won't ever. I felt like there was so much that was healed and set free and solidified and yet released, right, in that time. It was a real sifting experience for me in a lot of ways. And I will always be incredibly grateful for that, and I want to pay attention when God shows up in these seemingly small and mundane ways that somehow are the most holy, as good as it gets kind of moments of our lives.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's hard to pay attention. I like what you said about paying attention. I think sometimes it feels hard to pay attention unless we're like really, really, really thinking, I'm going to pay attention here. And I know that sounds like a redundant statement, but the world is
so... It requires intentional.
Yes,
right?
It requires to be intentional, to be like, today I'm going to use a silly phrase, like stop and smell the roses. Today I'm going to look around and see the small things that matter. And I think that's hard, but I think it's good for us as people and as women, for sure, to be able to do that.
Totally. I feel like God often hides in plain sight in our right now life. If that makes sense. Like it's just, I think that sometimes we can think that it has to look a certain way, or we've got to be this big evangelical hero, or it's only in these big mountaintop experiences, or only these people who are off and doing incredible, amazing things. And instead, we often find God in the dailiness of our lives.
Yeah.
Really, I have felt like when I encounter God, whether it's, through laundry or through my children or through my community or through whatever else, it's like, oh, I'm always kind of surprised, like, oh, well, God's meeting me here too, and this is changing me too. And it's like I don't have to be off in the mission field or whatever else. It just looks, big faith looks a lot like faithfulness.
Yeah. And for us to understand that it can change your world, because then these things, I mean, this is like what Emily Freeman talks about in her new book. It can change the way that we do everyday things, or it can change the way we think about everyday things. For me personally, I love motherhood, but like you said, there are some parts that I don't like. And so for me to take some things about my kids that drive me crazy, and then to try to find the moments in those. Try to look at that moment and be like, there's something here for me. I know it, and what is it? Instead of resisting it. So wonderful.
It is.
So wonderful.
Yeah, it
is. Hey guys, before we get back to the show with Sarah, I want to tell you about an organization called Love with Food. They're also a sponsor of the Happy Hour, and lovewithfood.com is the easiest way to snack smart and do good. Discover and try the best organic or all-natural snacks delivered to your door for as low as $10 a month membership fee. They also have gluten-free memberships. For every box sent, at least a meal is donated to feed hungry children in America. To date, Love with Food has donated more than 700,000 meals. So what are you gifting this holiday season? What about a gift that gives back? Love with Food snack subscription is a great way to try and discover new and all-natural snacks delivered to your door monthly. It's a great gift that keeps on giving. I have a code for you. Use the code LOVEJamie to save $5 on any subscription plan today. Go to lovewithfood.com, use the code LOVEJamie. Why not give love with food this holiday season? It's the gift that keeps on giving. All right, guys, back to the show. Okay, Sarah, let's move on to something that's not so deep and not going to make me cry over here. I want to know, you're a writer, and I've told people at the beginning, but you have a book come out in 2013, Jesus Feminist. You have a book coming out in November, which by the time this airs will already be out. And so I hope that when people are listening that it is done wonderfully well. Out of Sorts, Making Peace with an Evolving Faith. And you wrote that in the midst of your pregnancy. Is that true?
Yes, I did. It was awful. I don't recommend it.
I was like, that's a lot going on.
I wrote my first book when I started it when I was on maternity leave with my third. And of course, here in Canada, you get a year of maternity leave. And so I had like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and a brand new baby. And people would always say to me, how did you manage to write a book? And now I know the answer to that question. The answer is, they napped and they had really small lives, right? Like nobody was in school. I wasn't chasing anybody around to Girl Guides and basketball and, friendship dynamics. It was like they all went to bed at 7 o'clock at night and
So
they all took, had either naps or quiet time. And, so our lives were really, in a really good, predictable rhythm. Whereas now it feels like a 3-ring circus because they're all older, and then you have a new baby in the mix. And so it's like my kids go between 9, which is kind of on that precipice of tween years and all the things that come along with that.
Yes.
And then all the way across the whole spectrum, right? Yeah. And so it was hard. You know what? This was a hard one to write. It was deep subject matter that I was really wrestling with. I wrote it more for the people who find themselves wandering a little bit, who feel a little bit like they don't belong anymore, that they are sort of in between what they used to believe or think, and they haven't quite landed somewhere yet. And they're questioning and they're kind of sifting and figuring out, what are some of the things about my faith and my beliefs that I want to keep, and what are some of the things that I want to release, all those different types of things. And so it's not so much, a book about, here's where I've landed and go ahead and make sure your opinions all match mine because I'm so right.
Right.
It's more about, having permission, to sort of begin that process and to not be afraid of asking those questions, that God is wanting to meet you in that space. So deeply important to me because I went through that myself.
This is like your journey.
Yeah, it's in a way, part of my own story. But then on top of that, you've got an unexpected pregnancy and all these other things happening. So it was a huge amount of work. It took a lot out of me to get done. And then, of course, I was editing with a newborn. I'm glad. And I think it brought a real different tone to the book because, it was a lot more raw. It was a lot more like in the trenches with this internal thing. That I'm sure comes across in the book, but I don't think I'd ever do that again.
You're like, that was the last time.
And last time.
Well, you don't have to do that again since you got your 4 babies. There you go.
I do.
There you go. Okay, what are you reading right now, Sarah?
I've got a few I'm one of those people who reads like half a dozen books at the same time.
I love that. It's hard for me to do, but I do like when people do it. I'm like, I give you a lot of props for that.
Oh, I read based on my mood, and I read a lot. I don't. It's just something that So I'm reading William Paul Young's new novel, Eve.
Okay.
It's a retelling, kind of a Madeleine L'Engle fantasy version of the Garden of Eden story.
Okay.
So I'm reading that one. I'm reading Hands-Free Life. I just forgot the gal's name though, off the top of my head. It's not sitting in front of me. I'm
Rachel, maybe Rachel something. Am I off?
Thing or other. I think you might be right. I feel really bad. I don't remember her name.
It's okay.
I got it in front of me. Oh, well, so Hands-Free Life is another one that I'm reading right now. I'm also reading Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm super excited about that one. And then I am reading the gospel, what's the name of it again? I think it's called Telling the Truth by Friedrich Buechner.
Okay.
The gospel is tragedy, comedy, and fairy tale. Fantastic book.
Someone just told me on the show that they were reading that.
Oh my
I can't remember who it was.
It's one of those books that I read and I'm like, I quit everything.
I'm done. Hang it up.
This is everything. I'm done. I'm just going home now. I'm just going to read novels the rest of my life.
I'm just going to read and drink tea. That's what you would do.
That's pretty much 100% what's going to happen.
Yes,
so those are the ones I'm reading right now, kind of in the thick of it. Loving all of them. I love to read poetry and novels and spiritual memoirs and nonfiction all over the place. So
I love that. I always think of you when I see poetry because I'm like, all right, Sarah likes to read that. And I have never a day in my life since high school read poetry.
Oh, this is a sad story to me.
I know, I'm missing out, huh? I know.
I remember hearing once, one of my favorite poets is Lucy Shaw. And I heard her speak one time, and she, a couple of times actually, I've been to readings of hers. Amazing woman. She's like 85. She's got really short, close cropped white hair. She goes camping. She has a tattoo. She's like my spirit animal.
Yeah.
And so I remember hearing her once say that poets have this slender antenna that just combs the air looking for signals from another universe. And I always feel like when I read poetry, it kind of helps me hear what they hear and see what they see and see my life more clearly. It just distills things to a more, the essence of it. I love it.
I maybe need to give it a try.
Yeah.
I need to give it a try.
That's
Where
good.
should I start? Where should I start, Sarah?
One of my favorites is Lucy Shaw.
Okay.
She's a living poet right now. I also really like Mary Oliver and Wendell Berry.
Okay.
Either any of those three would be a great place to start for sure.
I'm gonna start.
There's a lot of other ones as well too that are great, but that's good
Perfect.
start.
Okay, what are the three things you're loving these days, Sarah Bessey?
Oh, three things I'm loving these days. Well, first of all, it's fall here.
Which is
So
awesome.
yes, it's amazing. So I mean, just the colors. I mean, everything's crimson and gold and orange, and the sky is so blue. Just gorgeous, gorgeous weather here right now. And I have fallen absolutely head over heels with like flavored tea.
Because
And
you're
so
a tea drinker.
I'm a huge tea drinker.
Okay.
But usually I'm more of like a purist. I'm like a black tea, English breakfast, Earl Grey on when I'm feeling fancy, Earl Grey.
Okay. Okay.
I'm more of like a purist on that. But I have discovered this place called David's Tea. They have shops here in Canada. I think they might have a few in the States too. But they have a lot of different, like they do like a seasonal tea kit every year. So they have like pumpkin chai, and then they have like a maple sugar, and I am just like making a fresh pot of something new and delicious every day, and it feels so fall, and you just curl up with your book, or you kind of wander around with your mug in your hand as you're kind of going about your day, and it just is perfect.
Okay, what's the second thing you're loving?
Second thing I'm loving, Great British Bake Off.
What
It is
this?
a TV show. Okay, first of all, I am like a huge devotee of British television. It is amazing. I love British television. I love Doctor Who and Downton Abbey and Call the Midwife, and all my favorite shows are British shows. But
Which I'm gonna just let you in. I mean, I'm feeling like that we can't be friends. I don't read poetry, I don't drink tea, and I don't watch British TV either.
hey, this is fine.
But
You know
these
what?
are all the things I love about you so much.
No, and there are so many things about you that I love that you bring other things into my life. This is what's good. If we were the exact same, we wouldn't need to be friends.
It would be boring too. Okay, tell me about this British show.
So, Great British Bake Off is a reality TV show. It's kind of like, it is. It's a baking competition, and it's judged by these two people named Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood. You cannot make these names up.
I was gonna say.
And it is a delight. Like, it is a confection of a show. And so I think it's on Netflix now, like the first season, but they're up to like season 7, or I think. It is just an absolute delight. It is the show you watch when you just want to be happy, or you want to just enjoy yourself, because there's none of the like, one of the things I don't like about a lot of reality TV is like there's this nasty undertone to it, and that isn't there. It's very much like it's about baking, and it is about like just the people are so interesting and funny, and it's kind of quirky, and it's just lots of drama, but it is just a lovely and bright delight of a show. And so, Great British Bake Off is a great way to be happy.
Okay, it sounds marvelous.
It is. It's super fun.
We used to watch
like the stuff they make is insane.
And then you just are in love.
Oh, totally.
Oh, I love it. Okay, what's your third thing?
Well, the third thing I was going to say was actually Elizabeth Gilbert's podcast. So now I feel like I need to come up with something else all of a sudden off the top of my head.
That can totally be your third thing, and I love that you said that, because it would be one of my top 3 things today as well.
It is crazy. Elizabeth Gilbert makes me feel like I should be writing novels, and like just all this other stuff. I don't know what it is, but I listen to that show and I'm like, I feel like an artist again. I feel like I want to create things again, and I feel like life is good and alive with possibility. And it's a little bit hilarious. After I finish, like I go on my little walk and I listen to my podcast, and I come home and I walk in and I said to my husband, I'm like, Elizabeth Gilbert says I need to have an affair with my art.
And he's like, what?
It made sense at the time.
Oh man, I mean, I told you already. I was listening to it today before we got on air, and I was driving, and I literally felt like you just said. I felt like I can do this. Like I can go do this. And I mean, it's so encouraging, and it doesn't matter what you're creating or what your art is or what your job is.
It's about like production and promotion, payment and blah, right? It's about the good stuff.
Yes.
Creating and doing something. It's amazing.
It's so wonderful. So I've already listened to the first 2 episodes, and I started number 3 already, and then I've already listened to the last one. I don't know if it's the last one, but the latest one with Brene Brown. But I will finish all of these in the next 2 days, because I get in the car and I turn it on and I put it on like speed and a half. Have you ever done that on your podcast when you're listening?
I haven't. That's brilliant though. Some people talk very slow.
Yes. And so at first you're like, I can't listen to this because they sound like chipmunks because it's fast. But then you get used to it and you're like, so it goes faster. All that to say, I can devour
Right.
podcasts easier when I speed it up a little bit.
Oh, you know what? That is a great idea because I often sort of wonder when people manage to listen to all the things and watch all the things that apparently everybody is able to watch and listen and do.
Right.
And I feel like I'm just like missing it because I'm more of an introvert by temperament and I like a lot of quiet and my children are very loud. So it's like I don't listen to music because I'm like I already have a pretty good noise level in this house at all times. I don't need to add layers of more noise.
Exactly.
And so the only time I listen to things is if I'm walking by myself or if I'm like driving by myself, which happens like never.
I know. Yeah.
So plus I think that's part of the reason why I like Elizabeth Gilbert's is because hers are like, 15 or 20 minutes.
Yep.
And so I feel like I
to
can just kind
to.
of like snatch it and just kind of carry on. So it's been
Except
good for me.
I always want to rewind because I'm like, I need to hear that again. What did you just say? That was
I
so
know.
wonderful.
It is good. The one with Cheryl Strayed was like phenomenal.
Yes.
In terms of what we were talking about earlier about like the motherhood versus kind of your vocation or calling. And, it's really very freeing.
Yeah. Very, very wonderful. Did you read her book, Wild?
I did a long time ago, though. I don't remember much about it.
Yeah. I read it a while ago as well. But anyhow, okay. Sarah Bessey, thank you so much.
Oh, are you kidding me? I have so enjoyed our chat, Jamie. I love talking to you.
So I love it as well. And I did a little Periscope before we got on, and I was like, I can't wait to talk to Sarah for so many reasons. But I also love how she says "mom." I was like, I just love listening to her. So Thank you for letting me listen to your beautiful accent.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamie. I've enjoyed our chat. You have a good rest of your day, hey?
You too. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Wasn't that a great chat with Sarah? I absolutely loved her Canadian accent and her wisdom about what being a mom and achieving balance really means. And the story about our daughter Maggie, really, really great stuff. As usual, any books that we talked about on the Happy Hour, you can find them at jamieivey.com/happyhourbooks. I want to remind you that during the Christmas season, a big way to help out the Happy Hour is to shop on Amazon using my referral link. If you're like me, you will be getting some last-minute stocking stuffers, last-minute gifts, and Amazon is your best friend during December, especially if you have the Prime 2-day shipping. But all you need to do if you want to help out the Happy Hour is go to jamieivey.com/Amazon. And that link's going to take you straight to Amazon, and you just do any and all of your Christmas shopping. But you buying gifts is going to actually give a little bit back to the show, and that helps me with my expenses for putting on the podcast. Again, it's jamieivey.com/Amazon. Go there, finish your Christmas shopping, and help your favorite podcast at the same time. Guys, remember, everything we chatted about will be up on my website, jamieivey.com, and I actually would love to hear from you. Find me on Twitter. It's at Jamie_Ivey. Find me on Instagram. It's Jamie Ivey. Find me on Facebook, Jamie Ivey, and share with me something that you love from this episode. I truly love hearing your thoughts every single week. Today's show is edited by Knox McCoy, and the music is from Austin Stone Worship's A Day of Glory Christmas album that you can find on iTunes. Next week, my guest is going to be Jamie Nadeau, who has such a great outlook on marriage. Her and her husband walked through some really tough years a while back, and her and I had one of my favorite conversations about marriage ever on the show. You're going to love that show with Jamie Nadeau, whether you are married or not. It goes way beyond that. So look for us next week. I know it's right before Christmas, but maybe you'll be traveling, or maybe you just need to head to another room when you're have a bunch of people at your house and need to have a little retreat with me and Jamie. Guys, enjoy your week. It's almost Christmas. I hope that you are enjoying your family. I hope you're relaxing, and I hope that you are anticipating celebrating the birth of Jesus. Share the show with a girlfriend and have a happy hour with a friend and tell me about it, guys. I will see you next week with my friend Jamie Nadeau.